Hello, my name is Dr. Lani Watson and I am the Questions Doctor. I'm a philosopher and author. I did my PhD on the topic of questions and I've been researching and writing about questions for almost 2 decades. So, let me ask you one. How many questions should you ask on the perfect first date? How many questions should you ask on the perfect first date? I'm asking this, of course, because it's Valentine's Day, and perhaps some of you are even preparing for a first date tonight, or maybe sometime in the near future. Knowing how many questions you should ask for a successful date might help to ease some of those first date nerves, or perhaps it's just an interesting distraction. But this question doesn't only apply to people who are about to go on a first date. It's actually a useful question to ask for anyone who's meeting someone for the first time and wanting to establish a real and authentic connection. So to find the answer, we can look at an interesting study that was conducted back in 1997 by a group of social psychologists at the Stony Brook University in New York, led by a husband and wife team, Arthur and Elaine Aaron. So the study tested the effects of what these researchers called a closeness generating procedure, which consisted of exactly 36 questions. These questions were asked and answered by pairs of psychology students in the course that the professors were running. But these weren't just any questions. They were designed specifically with the aim of helping the students to quickly establish a connection with one another and then build a closer and closer bond as the questions progressed. So the researchers did this by designing a set of questions that gradually increased in intimacy, meaning that the students were encouraged to share increasingly sort of meaningful personal information throughout the task. So the first questions provided simple conversation starters, for example, who would you invite to dinner if you could invite anyone in the world, or what is your perfect day? But as the task progressed, the questions got more personal. So question 15, for example, what is the greatest accomplishment of your life? Or question 20, what does friendship mean to you? Question 30, when did you last cry in front of another person? And question 35 of 36, of all the people in your family, whose death would you find most disturbing and why? These later questions are certainly not the type of questions we're used to asking someone we've only just met. And personally, I don't think that last one would be my top pick for a first date. And in fact, you might think that they would only really be appropriate to ask our closest friends and loved ones during particularly deep and intense life-defining moments. But the researchers behind the study found that the students who went through the full 36 questions involved in the closeness generating procedure did indeed experience a heightened feeling of closeness with their partners immediately after, compared with students in a small talk control group who were asking much less intimate and personal questions. So none of these students had ever met before, and yet those asking the closeness questions found closer and more personal bonds with their partners. The questions seemed to act a little bit like magnets, drawing together the students closer and closer together as the experiment progressed. Now, you might have heard about this study before. It became briefly famous in 2015 when a journalist at the New York Times came across it and wrote an article called The 36 Questions That Lead to Love. Several other journalists also covered the study at that time, enthusiastically suggesting that these 36 questions could provide a quick route to happily ever after. By the way, if you're interested, I'll post a link to the full list of 36 questions in the comments on social media, and I'd absolutely love to know if you get a chance to try them out, maybe on a date tonight. And of course, let me know if it leads to a second date or not. Just let me know in the comments or on social media and I'll be responding to everything. In fact, of course, the research behind this study did not claim to have found a magic recipe for true love. They have, however, identified a key ingredient. The questions we ask when we meet someone for the first time affect how they relate to and perceive us. Likewise, the questions we are asked by others affect what we think of them, often subconsciously, and they influence how we respond. Questions help kickstart conversations and keep them flowing without too many awkward silences, and they allow us to learn about and show an interest in each other. In other words, questions help us build relationships. The Stony Brook experiment provides some interesting empirical evidence for this, but of course it's something that many of us already know intuitively. Many of us, that is, but not all. For some, this insight may not come as naturally, and in some cases it can prove to be a real impediment. I've actually lost track of the number of times that, I've been told by a friend after an unsuccessful date that their prospective partner didn't ask any questions. And I can understand that frustration. What a person with this complaint has probably experienced is a lopsided question-answer dynamic. And this happens when one person is asking the majority of the questions and the other person is providing all the answers. Of course, there's nothing inherently problematic about that kind of dynamic. People have different comfort levels when it comes to asking and answering questions. But the complaint that a prospective partner failed to ask any or enough questions on a first date is real and common enough to give anyone about to embark on a date pause for thought. On a first date in particular, a lopsided question-answer dynamic may well be decisive. A lack of questions can be significant, a source of dissatisfaction. It can be even a knock to a person's self-esteem. And the chances of a second date as a result may well be radically diminished. What's more, the two parties in this scenario may come away with dramatically different impressions of the success of the date. So the person answering the questions may well think the date's gone exceptionally well, right? They've just had an engaging conversation with someone who apparently wants to know all about them and their life. But the person doing all the asking has had quite a different experience. They've shown a lot of active interest in another person, learned all sorts of things about them, while at the same time, that other person has shown apparently no interest in them. They may well leave the date feeling that their life, their interests, their perspective are just not interesting or important enough to learn about, at least not to this person. The more one-sided the questioning, the more imbalanced the outcome is likely to be. And the different experiences may feel surprising given that the two parties are essentially involved in the exact same conversation. But lopsided question-answer dynamics can make a significant and lasting difference to the way a person feels during the course of and after a conversation. And this is certainly something to pay close attention to on a first date. And again, this doesn't only apply to those in the dating game. A lopsided question-answer dynamic can arise in any conversational scenario, or indeed it can define the shape of an entire relationship over many years. So we're actually going to look at the role that questions play in other types of personal relationships next time. And if you're interested, please do like and subscribe and follow the Questions Doctor on social media so you can follow along with the research. For now though, let's return to that question I asked at the start. How many questions should you ask on the perfect first date? The answer may not be precisely 36, but it is almost certainly more than 0. More importantly, the 36 questions experiment offers a useful strategy for building and sustaining a connection with someone you are meeting for the first time, or indeed with anyone you're hoping to build a closer relationship with. Beginning with interesting questions that get you both talking is a great place to start, but staying in that comfort zone may prevent you from diving into the deeper territory where a closer connection and a more substantive relationship can be built. So seeking questions that gradually progress from fun and interesting starting points towards deeper and more meaningful opportunities to share in each other's worlds, lives, hopes and fears and so on is a powerful way to intentionally use the natural connectivity of questions, to harness their magnetic force to create closer bonds and ultimately lay the groundwork for more meaningful relationships over the long term. So if you are going off on a first date today or in the near future, or if you're trying to build a connection or a relationship with someone you've met recently, just think about this. Think about the questions that you might want to ask, the questions that you might want to start asking, the questions that you might progress to asking, over the course of a conversation. Maybe it's over an app, maybe it's over a dinner, maybe it's over a glass of wine, maybe it's over email, maybe it's old-fashioned letters that you're sending. But remember to pay attention to that lopsided question-answer dynamic and take control of both asking as well as answering questions. So with that in mind, I'd really love to hear any suggestions for any great questions to ask on a first date or when you're meeting someone for the first time. Maybe it's a question you've been asked before, or a question that you've asked someone that's been really exciting and interesting. Maybe it's a question that you've always wanted to be asked, or that you would like to be asked on a first date. Please share those in the comments and on social media. I'll be collecting them all together, and I'll respond to all the comments as well. So please do let me know. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. And remember to stay curious.